There comes a quiet moment in life after all the years of raising children, nurturing them, and giving your very best, when you suddenly feel a shift. Perhaps your words are brushed aside, your efforts overlooked, or your presence taken for granted. It's painful, especially when it comes from the very people you once carried in your arms and protected with all your heart. If you've ever felt the sting of being dismissed by your own children, please know this: you are not alone and you are not without power. Respect may fade over time, but it can also be rebuilt, not with anger, not with pleading, but with quiet strength, dignity, and wise action. In this video, we'll walk through 6 powerful steps you can take when your children no longer treat you with the respect you deserve. These are not about creating distance or conflict. They're about reclaiming your voice and presence in a way that feels peaceful, grounded, and true to who you are. Let's begin this journey together. Stop chasing their approval. One of the most common and heartbreaking patterns in aging parent-child relationships is the silent effort to earn your children's approval, often at the cost of your own well-being. You may find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, changing your schedule to fit theirs, and holding back your opinions, just to keep the peace. At first, this may seem like love, but over time, it begins to feel like you're disappearing. Here's the hard truth: the more you seek their approval, the less likely they are to offer you respect. Respect doesn't come from overgiving. It comes from self-respect. When your children see that you always bend, always accommodate, and always stay quiet, they begin to expect it, and soon they take it for granted. Take someone like Margaret, a woman in her 70s who used to be strong, independent, and full of spirit. But in recent years, she started giving her children full control of family decisions. She never voiced her needs, never asked for help, and quietly tolerated being spoken to with less care. "I just want to keep the family together," she said. But what she didn't realize was that in trying to hold things together, she was slowly losing herself. If you feel your children don't treat you with the dignity you deserve, it may be time to stop trying to earn their approval and start honoring your own. That means setting clear boundaries, saying no when something doesn't feel right, and speaking your truth even if it's not what they want to hear. When you begin to value yourself again, something remarkable happens. Your children start to see you differently, not as someone who's always available, but as someone with depth, strength, and integrity. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but over time your quiet self-respect becomes undeniable. True. Senior wisdom often begins with remembering who you are and no longer apologizing for it. If this resonates with you, it's okay to take small steps towards standing in your truth. That strength not only restores your peace, it invites others to treat you with the respect you've always deserved. Don't argue. Lead by example. When your children speak over you, dismiss your words, or treat you with less respect than you deserve, the natural reaction is to argue back. You may feel the urge to remind them of everything you've done, to raise your voice, to demand they listen. But here's something many wise elders have learned the hard way: arguing rarely leads to understanding, and almost never to respect. Respect isn't earned by trying to win an argument. It's earned by how you carry yourself, especially when emotions are high. When you remain calm, steady, and sure of who you are, it creates a quiet power that others feel even if they don't immediately acknowledge it. Take someone like Frank, a retired teacher in his early 70s. He spent decades leading classrooms with confidence, but at home, his grown children often cut him off or rolled their eyes when he spoke. At first he pushed back, raising his voice, defending his opinions, but the more he argued, the more distant they became. One day Frank made a quiet change. He stopped trying to fight for respect with words. Instead, he chose to model it. He listened thoughtfully. He spoke with care, not force, and he carried himself with the same calm presence he once used in the classroom. Slowly, his children began to notice. They started to listen more because he wasn't demanding their attention. He was commanding it with quiet dignity. This is the essence of senior wisdom. When you hold yourself with grace, when you choose patience over pride, you teach others how to treat you, not by lecturing them, but by showing them. So if you're feeling hurt by the way your children speak to you or overlook your thoughts, resist the urge to fight back. Instead, stand tall in who you are. Your steadiness will say more than any argument ever could. Over time, they'll come to recognize your strength, not just as a parent, but as a person. And that recognition, earned through presence, rather than persuasion, is often the beginning of true respect. Withdraw your emotional dependence. One of the quiet challenges many older adults face is the feeling of being emotionally dependent on their children. You may love your children deeply. You've raised them, guided them, stood by them through every season of life. So naturally, as they grow older, you hope for that same closeness in return. But when that connection starts to fade or becomes one-sided, it can hurt deeply. Here's a truth that's hard to accept but deeply freeing. The more emotionally dependent you are on your children, the less they may respect that need. When you rely on them to feel appreciated, included, or validated, it can begin to feel like pressure, and instead of bringing them closer, it may actually push them further away. Take Helen, for example, a kind and thoughtful woman in her late 70s. As her children got busy with their own families and careers, she found herself waiting by the phone. When they didn't call, she'd call them. When they didn't visit, she'd remind them how much she missed them. Her heart was in the right place. But over time, they started seeing her calls not as warm check-ins, but as obligations. The warmth began to fade. Then something shifted. Helen stopped calling first. She joined a local book club, took up painting again, and began spending time with neighbors and old friends. She focused on her own joy. Slowly, her children began calling more often. They were no longer responding out of guilt. They were genuinely interested. Why? Because Helen had become someone who inspired respect and admiration simply by investing in her own well-being. This kind of emotional self-care is a quiet but powerful act of senior wisdom. It shows others that your happiness doesn't depend on their attention. You are whole on your own. And that's when people often begin to treat you differently, with more respect, more curiosity, and more sincere affection. If you're navigating a shift in your relationship with your children, take a moment to reflect. Are you giving them space to come toward you? Are you cultivating a life that brings you joy first? When your emotional wellness doesn't hinge on others, you become someone others naturally want to be around. That is the heart of senior wellness, a life lived with balance, dignity, and self-respect. Set boundaries and enforce them. One of the most empowering things you can do as a parent, especially in later life, is to set clear boundaries with your adult children. It's a quiet act of self-respect that speaks louder than any lecture or argument. When your children treat you dismissively, interrupt you, or disregard your feelings, it's often not because they don't care, it's because the lines of respect were never firmly drawn, and over time what's allowed becomes what's expected. Boundaries are not about conflict. They're about clarity, about calmly, firmly letting others know what behavior is okay and what's not. Take Robert, for example, a retired executive who had led teams and solved complex problems throughout his career. Yet at home with his grown children, he found himself constantly interrupted, dismissed, or brushed aside. At first he stayed quiet. He told himself it wasn't worth the argument, but over time that silence turned into resentment. One day he decided things had to change. When his son interrupted him, Robert gently said, "I'll finish speaking when you're ready to listen." When his daughter mocked his opinion, he replied calmly, "You don't have to agree with me, but I do expect respect." He didn't shout. He didn't demand. He simply stood his ground, with dignity. At first they were surprised, but eventually they adjusted. They began listening more carefully. They started thinking before they spoke. Why? Because Robert had changed the rules, not by punishing or pushing, but by valuing himself enough to expect more. This is the power of boundaries. They're not about cutting ties or creating distance. They're about setting the standard for how you deserve to be treated, especially in your own home or personal space. If you're struggling to feel respected, ask yourself, what are you tolerating that's hurting you? And what would happen if you gently but firmly said, "This is not okay with me"? You deserve relationships that honor your experience, your voice, and your heart. As part of a healthy senior living journey, setting boundaries is an act of quiet strength, and enforcing them is a step toward true peace, not only with others, but within yourself. This is what senior wisdom looks like in action. Stop giving when there's no appreciation. As parents, we often give from the heart, our time, energy, and support without expecting anything in return. But as the years go by, there's a difficult truth. Many seniors quietly face giving too much for too long without appreciation can lead to feeling invisible and taken for granted. It's not about stopping generosity. It's about recognizing when that generosity is being misused or expected rather than cherished. When you continue to give to your adult children emotionally, financially, or with your time, and they no longer say thank you or show gratitude, a subtle but harmful shift takes place. Your kindness becomes routine to them. It's no longer seen as a gift. It becomes an obligation. Take Mr. James, a retired father of 3. For years, he helped his children financially, drove across town to assist them, and dropped everything when they needed him. Yet when he asked for a small help or a simple visit, there were excuses: no time, no effort, no thanks. One day, James quietly decided to make a change. He didn't get angry. He didn't cut anyone off. He simply stopped offering help before it was asked. He waited to see who would reach out on their own. And most importantly, he started saying no when he needed to. At first, his children were confused, even a little upset, but slowly something shifted. They began calling to check in, not to ask for things. They started expressing thanks, realizing that his time and care weren't endless. This isn't about withholding love. It's about protecting your energy and recognizing your worth. Generosity, especially in senior living, should come from a full heart, not a depleted one. When you give out of habit without receiving kindness in return, it drains you. But when you give from a place of balance and mutual respect, it builds connection. As part of your journey towards senior wellness, ask yourself, am I giving to be appreciated or am I giving to be needed? If you find that appreciation is missing, it might be time to pause and realign. You are worthy of being seen, not just for what you give, but for who you are. Build a life outside of your children. One of the most powerful ways to regain your children's respect is to show them that your happiness doesn't revolve around them. For many parents, it's natural to pour their hearts and time into raising their children. But as life moves forward, roles change. And if your world still centers entirely around them, they may begin to see you not as an individual, but as someone whose only purpose is to wait on their time and attention. The truth is, people respect those who live with purpose, those who have their own interests, passions, and sense of fulfillment. That doesn't end when your children become adults. In fact, it becomes more important than ever. Take someone like Eleanor, a widow in her late 70s. After her husband passed, she turned all of her focus toward her children. She called daily, offered advice they didn't ask for, and waited by the phone hoping for a visit. But instead of drawing her children closer, they started to drift. Her calls became background noise. Her needs felt heavy to them. Then one day, Eleanor made a shift. She joined a local art class. She began volunteering twice a week at a senior center. She made friends, started gardening again, and rediscovered joy in her own routine. And something interesting happened. Her children began calling more. They wanted to know about her day, what she was up to. They saw her differently. Not as someone waiting for them, but as someone with a vibrant life of her own. This isn't about replacing your children. It's about returning to yourself. When you build a life that brings you joy, that joy becomes magnetic. You become someone your family looks up to, not out of duty, but out of admiration. Whether it's reading, painting, traveling, volunteering, or simply enjoying peaceful walks in nature, these are not just hobbies. They are your way of saying, my life still matters. I still grow. I still shine. At Senior Wellness, we believe this independence is key to healthy aging. It's not selfish to invest in yourself. It's necessary. And when your children see you thriving, not only do they respect you more, they may even become inspired to follow your lead. No matter where you are in life, remember this, your value doesn't fade with time. It deepens. When you choose to live fully with purpose and self-respect, others naturally begin to treat you with the same dignity. You are still growing, still shining, and still worthy of joy. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to our Senior Wellness channel. Give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how you're creating a life that reflects your true worth. Stay well and never stop believing in yourself.